Between the 1700s and 1800s, Russian peasant families faced winters that weren't seasons. They were sieges lasting half a year, -50 degrees, 10 feet of snow, complete isolation, your modern heated home. The pipes would explode like cannons. The walls would bleed warmth faster than you could burn fuel. The foundation would crack under pressure that could bend steel. But these builders, armed with nothing but an axe and knowledge passed down through blood, they created homes that stayed warm from a single daily fire. Here's how people actually survived the Russian winter. Before we dive in, if these bedtime history stories are your thing, a like helps more than you'd think. And I'm genuinely curious about something. Where are you right now? Like physically? Drop your location and current time in the comments. Last video had someone from Brisbane saying good morning, while someone in Boston was saying good night. The whole time zone thing still messes with my head. Alright, let's head back to 1770-something. Trust me, it's going to be quite a ride. But first, get comfortable. Seriously, adjust those pillows. Pull up that blanket. Because where we're going, you're going to want to be cozy. Your eyes open to darkness. Not pitch black. There's a glow. Orange. Warm. Coming from the massive structure that dominates the single room where you, your husband, your 3 children, your husband's parents and his younger brother all sleep. The petch. 4 tons of clay and brick, taller than a man, wider than your bed would be if you had one. You don't have a bed. Nobody does. You're lying on boards called palati, wooden planks set up above the stove where the warmth rises and pools like invisible water. Your daughter Anya is pressed against your left side, your son Mikhail against your right. Little Katya is somewhere near your feet, her small body radiating heat like a coal. Your breath doesn't fog. That's how you know the petch is still working, unlike the frozen hell outside where the wind howls like wolves, where trees crack open from the cold with sounds like musket fire, where the snow has buried the world so deep you can't see the fence posts anymore. The stove. Always the stove. Everything starts and ends with the stove. You shift carefully. The palati creak. Anya mumbles something in her sleep. Below you, on the floor, you can hear your mother-in-law's steady breathing. She sleeps on a thin mat of felt with grandfather. The floor is wood, not stone. Cold, but not frozen. The petch sees to that. Your body aches. 35 years of this, of winters that try to kill you, of summers spent preparing for winters, of springs and autumns that feel like brief gasps of relief between the grinding stones of survival. Your husband Ivan is already moving. You can hear him in the darkness, his footsteps careful and quiet. He knows every board that creaks, every spot that groans under weight. This house, this izba, has been standing for 5 years now, long enough that the logs have settled into each other like old married people who've learned each other's shapes. Fire's low, he whispers. Not to you, to grandfather. From atop the warmest spot on the petch, where only the eldest get to sleep, comes a grunt. Grandfather doesn't talk much anymore. His joints are so stiff from decades of hard labour that climbing down from his perch would take him the better part of an hour. So he stays up there, ruling the household like a king on a throne made of warm clay, occasionally banging his wooden stick against the side of the petch when someone displeases him. Right now, the stick stays quiet. The fire being low is nobody's fault. It's just morning. You slide down from the palati carefully. Your feet find the floor. The cold hits through your thin stockings, but it's nothing compared to outside. Out there, the cold would kill you in minutes. In here, it's just uncomfortable. Think about that for a second. The difference between life and death is one wall of logs and some moss. That's it. That's all that stands between your family and freezing to death. The room is maybe 260 square feet. One room. That's the whole house. 10 people. All their belongings. The petch. A few benches. The icon corner where your husband's mother keeps the family's religious images on a special shelf. Some wooden chests with clothes. Barrels with grain. And somehow it works. Your husband is kneeling by the petch now, opening the small iron door to the fire chamber. The coals inside glow red, but they're definitely dying. He needs to feed it before it goes out completely, because if the fire dies, you're not getting it relit. Not easily, not in winter. You've heard stories. Families whose fires went out, who burned through their wood too fast or got careless or just had bad luck. By the time they realized the fire was truly dead, the house had already started getting cold, really cold, and relighting a fire with frozen hands in a frozen house with frozen kindling is basically impossible. Those families either begged wood and coals from neighbours, assuming they could reach the neighbours through the snow, or they died. Simple as that. "I'll help," you tell Ivan. Your voice comes out scratchy. You slept with your mouth open again. The air in the izba is dry despite the snow outside. The petch drinks moisture from the air like a thirsty animal. He grunts, not rudely, just acknowledgement. He's already placing small pieces of birch bark into the coals. Birch bark is basically magic. Even when wet, which it rarely is because you've all learned to keep it dry, it catches fire easily. The natural oils in the bark, same oils that make birch bark perfect for the roof. The bark catches. Orange flame licks up. Ivan adds thin sticks, kindling you prepared last summer, stored in the driest part of the house, protected like treasure, because that's exactly what it is, treasure. The ability to make fire, to sustain it, to keep it alive for 6 months without letting it die. Your modern gas furnace that kicks on whenever the thermostat drops below 70. Yeah, these folks would look at that and weep with envy. The fire grows. Ivan adds larger pieces. Not too fast. You have to coax the fire, not smother it. He's been doing this since he was old enough to hold wood. His father taught him. His father's father taught his father. This is how you stay alive. The flames are going now. Really going. The wood crackles and pops. The sound is almost cheerful. Almost makes you forget that outside the world is actively trying to murder everyone. "Bread?" Ivan asks you. You nod. Of course bread. There's always bread. Black rye bread that you'll eat with whatever else you have. Dried fish if you're lucky. Pickled vegetables from the root cellar if you're luckier. Cabbage, beets, onions, maybe some cheese if the goat is still producing. Though in winter, the goats barely give milk. The dough is already made. You prepared it last night. Let it rise near the warmth of the petch where the yeast could work. Rye flour, water, a bit of sourdough starter you've been maintaining for years. That's it. No fancy ingredients, no sugar. Maybe a tiny bit of salt if you have it. The loaves are shaped, waiting. You place them carefully into the petch's baking chamber, not the same chamber where the fire is burning. This is genius right here. The petch has multiple chambers, multiple flue passages. The fire burns in one area, the smoke travels through serpentine channels inside the clay and brick, giving up every bit of its heat before exiting through the chimney, and different parts of the massive structure reach different temperatures. The baking chamber can hit 400 degrees, hot enough to bake bread perfectly, to brown the crust, to fill the izba with a smell that makes your stomach clench with hunger. But the sleeping surface on top, that stays comfortably warm, not hot enough to burn, just warm enough that grandfather can sleep there all night without freezing. One fire, one structure, multiple functions. Heating, cooking, Sleeping, even bathing when you heat water and dump it over yourself while standing near the petch, trying not to splash everyone else because there's nowhere private to bathe. Privacy is a luxury you can't afford when survival requires everyone to cluster around the only heat source. The bread will take about an hour, maybe less. You'll know it's done when you can smell it and when you tap the bottom of a loaf and it sounds hollow. By then, everyone will be awake. The children are stirring now. You can hear Anya shifting on the Pilati. Mikhail is probably already awake, but lying still, trying to steal a few more minutes of warmth before he has to get up and face the day. What does a child do in winter, when going outside means dying, when there's no school, no town to visit, no friends to see because everyone is trapped in their own izbas, fighting their own battles with the cold? They help. That's what they do. Even the little ones. There's always work, always tasks, spinning wool into thread, mending clothes, helping prepare food, watching the younger children, feeding the animals in the barn, assuming the animals survived this long into winter, assuming you had animals in the first place. This isn't childhood like you know it. This is survival training that starts the moment you can walk. Katya, your youngest at 5, climbs down from the Pilati by herself now. She's learned careful steps, slow movements, one hand always gripping something. Falls can mean injuries, and injuries in winter can mean death because there's no doctor, no medicine, nothing but hope and prayer and maybe some herbs your mother-in-law knows about. Mama, Katya says quietly. She knows not to be loud. Grandfather's stick. Yes, little one. I'm hungry. Of course she is. You're all hungry. Winter is hunger. Your body burns through calories trying to stay warm. The cold leeches energy from you like a thief. You eat and eat and eat, and still you're hungry because your body knows deep in its bones that you need every scrap of fat and fuel to survive until spring. Bread is coming, you tell her. Go sit by the stove. Warm your hands. She toddles over. The petch is so massive she looks tiny next to it. 4 tons, 4,000 pounds of clay and brick and stone, taking up maybe a quarter of the entire room. Some people think that's wasteful. Why give up so much space to a stove? Those people don't understand. The petch isn't just a stove. It's the heart of the house, the soul of it, the difference between life and death. Ivan closes the fire chamber door, the iron damper, heavy, 50 pounds at least, maybe more. Once the door is closed and the damper is positioned right, the heat gets trapped inside the massive clay structure. The petch becomes a heat battery, storing warmth, radiating it slowly, steadily for the next 24 hours. 1 burn per day, that's all it takes. 1 fire in the morning. Feed it properly, let it burn for a few hours, then close the damper and let the thermal mass do its job. Your modern furnace runs constantly, burning gas or oil all day and night, and it still can't keep your house as consistently warm as the petch keeps this izba. Think about that. Ancient technology, clay and brick and knowledge, outperforming modern engineering. The smell of baking bread is getting stronger now. Your stomach makes an audible sound. Mikhail laughs from the Pilati. He's 11, old enough to think hunger is funny when he knows food is coming. Your mother-in-law is up now too. She moves slowly. Her joints are probably worse than grandfather's, but she never complains. Complaining doesn't change anything. She makes her way to the water bucket, dips a wooden cup. Drinks. The water is cold, but not frozen. Another miracle of the petch. Even the corner of the room where the water bucket sits stays just above freezing because the whole izba is one interconnected system, and the petch pumps out so much heat that nowhere inside gets truly cold. Outside, though, -50. 10 feet of snow, wind that could strip the skin off your face. The children are all down now, gathering near the petch like moths to flame. Anya helps her grandmother. Mikhail is supposed to be doing something. You can't remember what. Probably checking on the grain stores or making sure the mice haven't gotten into anything. Katya is just existing, being 5, trying to stay warm and wait for bread. Ivan is checking the chimney drawer, making sure smoke is escaping properly. If the chimney gets blocked by snow or ice, the smoke backs up into the izba and you have a choice. Go outside and possibly freeze to death clearing the chimney, or stay inside and suffocate. Some choice. Chimney's good, he says, relief in his voice. Every morning, it's a concern. Every morning, it could be the morning something goes wrong. But not today. Today, the chimney is clear, the fire is burning, the bread is baking, the petch is doing its job, your family is alive for another day, you're alive. That's the goal. That's always the goal. Survive, make it to spring, see the snow melt, watch the trees wake up, feel warmth that doesn't come from burning wood. You're standing near the petch now, your hands extended toward the radiant heat. The clay is warm to the touch, not hot enough to burn, but warm enough that it feels like the embrace of something alive and caring. This is why they built it this way, not just because it works, because it works perfectly. Because their ancestors figured out, through trial and error and probably a lot of frozen bodies, exactly how to build a structure that could keep a family alive through a Russian winter. 4 tons of thermal mass, 8 to 12-inch thick walls inside the petch made from a precise mixture of clay and sand and chopped straw. The straw binds the clay together and creates tiny air pockets that actually improve the insulation. Every detail matters. Every measurement has a reason. The gornalo. That's what they call the main combustion chamber, where the fire burns hottest, where the wood becomes heat and smoke. The walls of the gornalo are thick enough to absorb immense amounts of thermal energy, but not so thick that they crack from the temperature changes. The whole thing is an engineering marvel that most people don't appreciate because, well, it's just a stove, right? Wrong. It's the difference between your soft bed right now, your warm blanket, your full stomach and comfortable life, and a desperate, clawing fight for survival that lasts half the year and kills without mercy if you make one mistake. The bread is ready, you can tell. The smell, the colour, visible through the small opening. Perfect. Ivan pulls the loaves out carefully using a long wooden paddle. The crusts are dark brown, almost black, hard. The inside will be dense and filling. This bread could be a weapon if you needed it to be. Seriously, you could probably kill someone with one of these loaves. But it's food. And food is life. And life is what you're fighting for. The family gathers, grandfather still on his perch, everyone else standing or sitting on benches. You break the first loaf, steam rises, the inside is still hot, still moist from the baking. You tear off pieces, pass them around. Even grandfather gets his portion, passed up to him on the end of a wooden spoon because he's not climbing down for anything short of the house burning down. The bread is dense, sour from the sourdough starter, filling. You chew slowly, make it last. There will be more later, but right now, this moment, this warm bread in your hand, it's everything. Katya is already done with her piece, looking hopefully at the rest of the loaf. Later, you tell her. She pouts, but doesn't argue. She's learned. Food is rationed. Not cruelly, just carefully, because you need to make everything last. Grain stores only go so far. Spring is months away. Months. The fire in the petch is settling into coals now. Ivan will let it burn down slowly. In a few hours, he'll close the damper completely and seal in the heat. The clay and brick will do the rest, radiating warmth, keeping the izba livable, keeping your family alive. This is your morning. Every morning. For months. Wake up, feed the fire, bake bread, survive another day. It sounds monotonous, and yeah, it kind of is. But monotony is better than death. Boredom beats freezing. And honestly, there's a rhythm to it, a comfort in the routine. You know what to expect. You know the fire will burn, the bread will bake, the petch will keep you warm. As long as you do your part, as long as you maintain the system, it works. That's more certainty than a lot of people had back then. More certainty than people caught in wars or famines or plagues. You have your family, your izba, your petch, and a fighting chance. The morning light is starting to seep in through the small windows. Not much light. The windows are tiny, glass is expensive, and anyway, big windows just mean more cold getting in. You had one glass window put in the front wall last year. Red glass. Beautiful. It cost more than you wanted to think about, but it was important. The red window facing the street. Every decent izba has one. Through the window you can see snow. Just snow. The world is white and dead and frozen. But in here, in this one room with 10 people and 4 tons of clay and brick, there's warmth, light, the smell of bread, life. Your husband is checking the wood supply. You keep the wood inside, stacked against one wall. Can't leave it outside or it gets buried under snow and... Anyway, frozen wood doesn't burn as well. You need the wood relatively dry, and that means storing it inside where the petch's heat can keep it from freezing solid. We're good for another week, Ivan says. Maybe 2 if we're careful. You nod. After that, someone will need to go to the woodshed, brave the cold, load up a sled, drag it back. It's dangerous. People have frozen to death doing exactly that. Got disoriented in the snow, couldn't find their way back. Died within sight of their own homes. But it has to be done. No wood, no fire, no life. Mikhail will probably go with his father. The boy needs to learn, needs to know how to do these things, because someday, probably sooner than you'd like, this will be his izba, his family, his responsibility. That's how it works. You learn by watching, by helping, by doing. No books, no schools, just knowledge passed from parent to child, from grandparent to grandchild, from one generation to the next. How to build a petch, how to maintain a fire, how to select wood, how to store grain, how to pickle vegetables, how to spin wool, how to survive. Everything you know, you learned from someone who learned it from someone who learned it from someone, going back through the generations, through centuries, to people whose names you don't even know, but whose knowledge keeps you alive. The peck radiates heat. Your family eats bread. Another day begins. Outside, the cold waits like a patient predator, but inside, for now, you're safe, warm, fed, alive, and that's enough. That has to be enough, because it's all you've got, and it's more than many people have, and you're grateful for it, even though your body aches and you're already tired, and the day has barely started, and there's months of this left, months and months, stretching out like an endless frozen wasteland. But you've done this before. You'll do it again. This is what survival looks like. Not heroic, not glamorous, just persistent, just waking up every day and doing what needs to be done and trusting that the petch will work and the fire will burn and somehow you'll make it to spring. Your daughter Anya is asking her grandmother something, about spinning probably. The girl is learning. Your mother-in-law is patient, showing her the technique, the twist of the wool, the steady pull. This is the other survival, the one that's not about cold or hunger. This is about knowledge, about skills, about making sure the next generation knows what to do, because someday you'll be the one on top of the petch. Someday Anya will be the mother feeding the fire, Someday, Mikhail will be the father checking the wood supply and teaching his own son how to survive a Russian winter. The cycle continues, has to continue, because if the knowledge dies, the people die. Simple as that. Grandfather bangs his stick against the petch. Everyone jumps slightly. He points at Mikhail, makes a gesture. The boy understands immediately, runs to get something, a cup of water. Grandfather is thirsty but can't climb down. The old man drinks, hands the cup back, settles into his spot. He'll probably sleep again soon. When you're that old, that stiff, sleep is about all there is. Sleep and warmth and the hope that you won't die before spring. Morbid, maybe, but it's real. Death is real. It's always close in winter. You can feel it outside the walls, pressing against the logs, looking for a way in. The petch keeps it out. The petch and the moss between the logs and the roof above and the foundation below and all the careful, deliberate engineering that went into building this izba. You think about the men who built this place, who selected the trees, who cut them in the depths of winter when the sap was down and the wood was densest, who carved the joints by hand with just an axe, who packed the moss between the logs, who built the petch brick by brick, knowing that if they got it wrong, people would die. That's pressure. That's real stakes. Build it right or kill someone's family. No second chances. No room for error. And they got it right. They got it so right that 5 years later you're standing here, warm and alive, eating bread baked in their masterpiece. The petch always comes back to the petch, the heart of the house, the soul of survival. 4 tons of clay and brick that love you more faithfully than any person ever could, because it never fails, never complains, never demands, just does its job, day after day, week after week, month after month, burning wood, storing heat, radiating warmth, keeping you alive. You rest your hand on the warm clay, feel the heat seeping into your palm. Thank you, you think, to the petch, to the builders, to the ancestors who figured this out, to everyone and everything that makes survival possible. Outside, the wind picks up. You can hear it howling, can hear the snow being thrown against the walls, can hear the trees cracking in the forest like gunshots. But in here, you're warm, you're fed, you're alive, and for now, for today, that's everything. The petch under your hand is warm, solid, reliable, but it wasn't always here. Let me take you back, 5 years ago, before this house existed, before the petch kept your family alive, back to when it was just an idea and a lot of anxiety. You remember when they built this petch, the memory is clear because you thought for sure the whole thing was going to collapse and kill someone. It didn't, obviously. You're standing here now, but back then you weren't so sure. The master craftsman's name was Pyotr. Old guy, maybe 60, which back then meant ancient, missing 2 fingers on his left hand from some accident he never talked about, had a beard down to his chest and eyes that looked right through you like he could see the quality of your soul. He showed up with his son. Kid was maybe 15, tall, gangly, trying to grow a beard and failing. The boy barely spoke, just watched his father with this intense focus, like he was trying to memorize every movement. "This is where you want it?" Pyotr had asked, standing in the middle of your brand new izba that smelled like fresh pine and optimism. Ivan nodded. "Center of the room, like every izba." "Every izba," Pyotr repeated, not agreeing, just stating a fact. Then he looked around, calculating something in his head. You could practically see him doing math. "You got 10 people living here?" "Eventually. Right now, just 6. 10, Pyotr said firmly. "You'll have 10, they always do. You need a petch for 10 people. Big one." Your husband hesitated. "How big?" 4 tons. The number hung in the air like smoke. 4 tons, 4,000 pounds of clay and brick and stone sitting in the middle of your wooden house. That won't, you started to say. Won't what? Won't collapse the floor? Won't crack the foundation? Won't be too heavy for the logs to support? Piotr looked at you. The petch is the house. Everything else is just walls to keep the petch dry. You understand? If I build this right, you live. If I build this wrong, you die. There is no in-between. Well, that was reassuring. He walked around the space where the petch would go, paced it off, muttered numbers. His son followed behind him like a shadow, watching, learning. The kid had a wax tablet and was making marks on it. Notes, measurements, knowledge being passed from father to son, the same way it had been passed for who knows how many generations. Your foundation stones good? Piotr asked. Just placed them last month, Ivan said. 4 big ones. Granite, level. Piotr grunted, went outside. You followed because honestly, watching a master craftsman work is better than anything else you had to do that day. The man got down on his knees in the dirt, looking at the foundation stones through a gap in the logs. These'll do, he said finally. Foundation moves, petch moves. That's fine. Peck cracks, you die, so we don't let it crack. He stood up, brushed dirt off his knees, looked at his son. Tell me why the petch doesn't crack. The boy swallowed. Because the clay mixture has the right amount of sand and straw. The sand makes it strong, the straw makes it flexible. Good. What else? The walls are thick, so the heat spreads out instead of making one spot too hot. Better. What else? The kid thought hard. You could see him sweating despite the cool autumn air. I don't know, father. The base, Piotr said, not angry, just teaching. The petch sits on its own foundation inside the izba, separate from the house foundation. When the house moves, the petch doesn't move. When the ground freezes and lifts the whole damn house, the petch stays put. Independent, you understand? The boy nodded, scratching notes on his tablet. This is what education looked like. Not books, not schools, just a father asking his son questions until the knowledge stuck. Piotr turned to you and Ivan. I need clay, good clay, not the garbage clay from the riverbank that crumbles when it dries. Real clay, the grey-blue kind from the pit near the old church. You know it? Ivan nodded. Need 2 wagon loads, maybe 3. Need sand, clean sand, not the dirty stuff with rocks and roots. Need straw, lots of straw, chopped fine. Need bricks, I got bricks. Need the special clay for the floor of the gornalo, I got that too. Cost you extra. Of course it did. Everything cost extra, but this was your life, your family's life. You paid. The work took 2 weeks, 2 weeks of watching Piotr and his son build what looked like a small house inside your house. They started with the base, thick wooden platform reinforced with extra logs underneath because, 4 tons. Then they laid a foundation of stones and brick. Special placement, everything level, everything precise. If the base isn't level, Piotr explained while working, the whole thing leans. Leans enough, it cracks. Cracks enough, smoke comes into the house instead of going up the chimney. Then you suffocate. Simple, simple, right. Simple, like how falling off a cliff is simple. The clay mixture was the key. You watched them make it. Clay, sand and chopped straw. But not just any ratio. Piotr had specific measurements, specific techniques. He'd grab a handful of the mixed clay, squeeze it, look at how it held together, then add more sand or more straw or more clay until it was exactly right. Feel this, he told you once, handing you a glob of the mixture. See how it's firm but still has give? That's what you want. Too firm, it cracks when it heats up. Too soft, it doesn't hold its shape. You squeezed it, felt the texture, the straw fibers running through it like tiny bones, the sand giving it grit, the clay binding it all together. This wasn't just construction. This was chemistry, physics, engineering, all wrapped up in the hands of a man who probably couldn't read but understood heat transfer better than most modern engineers. They built the walls of the gornalo first, the main combustion chamber where the fire would burn. The walls here needed to be thick, 8 inches minimum. Piotr made them closer to 10. "This is where it gets hottest," he said, smoothing clay with his damaged hand like the missing fingers didn't matter. "These walls see 1,000 degrees, maybe more. They need to absorb that heat without breaking. Thick walls absorb heat slowly. Spread it out. Keep everything from getting too stressed." His son was mixing more clay. The kid's arms were covered in the stuff up to his elbows. He looked tired but focused. This was his future. Someday he'd be the master craftsman. Someday some other father would hire him to build a petch and trust him with his family's lives. No pressure, kid. The gornalo took shape over 3 days. Piotr built it in layers, mix the clay, pack it, let it set for a few hours, add another layer, pack it, set, layer after layer until the walls were thick enough to hold back hell itself. Then came the clever part, the serpentine passages. "Watch," Piotr said. He took a long stick and traced a path through the clay he was laying. "Fire burns here in the gornalo. Smoke wants to go straight up and out, but if we let it go straight up, we waste all that heat, so we make the smoke work for its freedom." He was creating channels, passages, mazes inside the clay structure. The smoke would travel through these channels, twisting and turning, giving up its heat to the clay walls the whole time. By the time the smoke finally made it to the chimney, it would be cool, exhausted, wrung dry of every bit of warmth it had. "Every twist," Piotr said. "Every turn, the smoke touches more clay. More clay means more heat absorbed. More heat absorbed means warmer house. Make sense?" It made perfect sense. It was brilliant. His son was taking notes, sketching the pattern of the channels, learning, memorizing. This knowledge wasn't written in books. It lived in people's heads and hands. If the knowledge died, the people died. That's simple. The floor of the gornalo was special clay. Piotr had brought it in ceramic pots, wrapped in cloth, protected like treasure. Fire-resistant clay that could handle temperatures hot enough to melt iron. "This stuff," he said, unwrapping one of the pots carefully, "comes from way up north, costs more than I like to admit, but it's the only clay that won't crack at gornalo temperatures. Regular clay turns to dust. This stuff laughs at fire." He mixed it with sand, applied it carefully to the floor where the fire would burn brightest and hottest, smoothed it, made it level. Every movement was deliberate, practiced, perfect. You were watching him work when something occurred to you. "What happens if you make a mistake?" Piotr didn't look up. "Then I fix it now while the clay is still wet. Once this sets, once we fire it for the first time, any mistake becomes permanent, and permanent mistakes kill people. Has that ever happened?" He was quiet for a long moment, just kept smoothing the special clay. Then, once, long time ago, my first petch. I was young, thought I knew everything, built the gornalo walls too thin, wanted to save clay, save money, be efficient. What happened? The walls cracked. First winter. Family woke up to smoke filling the house. They got out in time, but barely. The children were coughing for weeks. Could have died. What did you do? Tore the whole thing down, rebuilt it, right this time, didn't charge them a single kopeck, learned my lesson. He finally looked up at you. His eyes were hard. Every petch I've built since, perfect, because I remember those children coughing. I remember almost killing a family because I was too arrogant to build it right the first time. His son was listening. good. Let the kid learn from his father's mistakes. Let him carry the weight of that story. Let him understand what's at stake. The petch grew taller. Day by day, layer by layer, the combustion chamber, the heat channels, the baking chamber that would reach 400 degrees for bread, the sleeping surface on top that would stay warm but not burning hot, every section carefully designed, every measurement precise. Pyotr built in the damper opening. This was where the heavy iron plate would go, the plate that would seal in the heat once the fire burned down to coals. He showed you the damper itself, massive thing, had to weigh at least 70 pounds, maybe 80. Or once the fire's good and hot, he explained, once the wood is mostly burned, you close this, seal it tight. Then all that heat, trapped, can't escape, has nowhere to go except into the clay. The clay soaks it up like a sponge soaks up water. Then, for the next day, the clay gives it back slowly, steadily, keeps you warm from one fire to the next. 1 fire a day, you said. Not a question. You'd heard this was possible, but it seemed impossible. 1 fire a day, Pyotr confirmed. If you build the petch right, if you use enough thermal mass, 4 tons of clay and brick, that's a lot of thermal mass, holds a lot of heat, his son piped up. Like a pot of hot water, father? How it stays warm for hours? Exactly like that. But bigger. Much bigger. This is a 4-ton pot. Takes hours to heat up. Takes hours to cool down. That's the secret. Slow heating. Slow cooling. Steady warmth. The kid beamed. Got the answer right, made his father nod in approval. Small victories in the transmission of knowledge. They built the top sleeping surface last. This needed to be smooth, comfortable enough that an old person could lie on it without getting bruised or cut. Pyotr smoothed the clay for hours. His son helped, both of them working the surface until it was perfect. Grandfather will sleep here, Ivan said, watching them work. Everyone wants to sleep here, Pyotr said. Warmest spot in the house. But yeah, grandfather gets it. That's how it works. You survive long enough to be the eldest, you earn the warm spot. Fair trade for decades of hard labour. When the petch was finally finished, it looked like a sleeping giant. Massive. Imposing. Taking up so much space that you wondered again how 10 people would live around it. But you'd learn, you'd figure it out, because the petch wasn't optional, it was mandatory, it was life. Now we fire it, Pyotr announced. Fire it? You didn't like the sound of that. First firing, got to heat it slowly, very slowly. Too fast and the clay cracks. Too slow and we'll be here all month, there's a balance. He built the smallest fire you'd ever seen in the Gornalo. Just a few sticks, barely enough heat to warm your hands. Let it burn, let it go out. Built another small fire, let it burn, let it go out. We're curing the clay, his son explained to you, clearly repeating lessons he had learned. Driving out the moisture, letting the heat change the clay from wet to permanent, like baking bread, but slower. It took 3 days of these tiny fires before Pyotr was satisfied. Then he built a slightly bigger fire, then a bigger one, working up gradually, letting the clay adjust, letting the structure settle into itself. Finally, on the 4th day, he built a real fire, full size, lots of wood, hot and bright and roaring. You stood back, watching, half expecting the whole thing to explode. It didn't. It just worked. The fire burned. The smoke travelled through those serpentine passages and came out the chimney. The clay started to warm up. You could feel it radiating heat. Pyotr stood there with his arms crossed, watching, waiting, looking for cracks, looking for problems, looking for any sign that he'd made a mistake. Nothing. No cracks. No smoke leaking into the room. No problems. His son was grinning, practically bouncing with excitement. They'd done it. Built a perfect petch. Pyotr didn't smile, just nodded once. Good, he said. Should last you 200 years if you maintain it properly. Maybe 300, 200 years. 300 years. Your great-great-grandchildren would be using this petch, learning to survive from it, sleeping on top of it, baking bread in it. How do we maintain it? Ivan asked. Don't let the fire get too hot too fast. Don't throw water on it when it's hot. Don't bang on it with hard objects. Clean the chimney once a year. Check for cracks every spring. If you find a crack, fix it immediately with clay. Small cracks are easy. Big cracks mean you call someone like me. He walked around the petch one more time, touching it, checking it, making sure. Then he turned to you and Ivan. This is good work. This will keep your family alive. Treat it with respect. Feed it good wood. Keep the fire steady, and it will love you back. Love you back. That was an odd way to put it. But he was right. The petch did love you. Love you in the only way an object could. By being reliable. By being consistent. By doing its job perfectly, day after day, year after year. Pyotr and his son left the next morning, took their payment, took their tools. The old man shook Ivan's hand, told him to send word if there were any problems. Then they were gone, off to build another petch for another family, carrying their knowledge with them. And you were left with this massive structure in the middle of your house. This 4-ton monument to survival, this masterpiece of clay and brick and ancient engineering. That first winter, you learned to trust it, learned its rhythms, how long to burn the fire, when to close the damper, how to use the different temperature zones, where to place bread for baking, where to heat water, where to dry clothes. The petch became part of the family. More than furniture, more than just a tool, it was alive in its own way, breathing heat, holding warmth, protecting you from the cold that wanted to kill you. 5 years later, standing here with your hand on the warm clay, you think about Pyotr, wonder if he's still alive, wonder how many other families are surviving right now, because he knew exactly how to mix clay and sand and straw. The petch radiates steady warmth, exactly as designed, exactly as promised. 200 years, he said, maybe 300. You believe him. The clay under your hand is warm, alive with trapped heat, with captured fire. 4 tons of thermal mass, serpentine smoke channels, fire-resistant clay floors, all of it working together, because anything less than perfect meant death, and Pyotr knew that. Your children are playing near the petch now. Anya and Mikhail are arguing about something. Katya is just warm and content, leaning against the clay, like it's a friendly giant. They don't know about Pyotr's missing fingers or his son's blistered hands, don't know about the 6-day curing process or the special northern clay. They just know they're warm, and that's enough. The fire has burned down to coals now. Ivan is reaching for the damper. Time to seal it. Trap the heat. Let the thermal mass do its magic. He closes the heavy iron plate with a solid thunk. The petch sighs, settles, begins its slow, steady radiation of captured heat. Outside, the wind howls. Winter does what winter does, but in here, you're warm, and that's everything. But the petch didn't arrive in an empty room. It needed walls, walls that could handle -50 without cracking, walls that would last centuries. Those walls have a story too. Let me show you how they came to be. The day they started building your izba, you thought the old builder had lost his mind. His name was Grigory, different guy from Pyotr the stove builder. Grigory did the logs, the actual house part, and when you saw him show up with nothing but an axe, you figured this was going to be a disaster. "Where's your saw?" Ivan had asked, looking around for the rest of the tools. Grigory just patted his axe. "Right here. That's an axe." "Yes." "For building a house?" "Yes." Ivan looked at you. You shrugged. "What were you going to do?" The guy came recommended. Every Isba in the village was built with just an axe. Apparently that's how it worked. Still seemed insane. Grigory's apprentice was his nephew, kid named Dmitri, maybe 17, with the kind of skinny arms that made you wonder if he could even lift a log, let alone cut one. But he carried his own axe, and he had this intense focus, like he was afraid if he blinked he'd miss something important. He was probably right. First thing, Grigory announced, walking around your foundation stones. We need trees, good trees, not garbage trees. Pine or spruce, 12 to 18 inches across, straight. No rot, no major knots, and we cut them in winter. It's autumn, Ivan pointed out. Right. So, we wait. You blinked. Wait? For winter? Wood's different in winter. Sap's down, trees basically asleep. Wood's denser, stronger, dries better, lasts longer. You want an Isba that stands for 200 years? You cut the trees when they're sleeping. Cut them in summer and they'll rot in 20. So you waited. Watched autumn turn to winter, watched the first snows fall, and when the cold really set in, when the forest was frozen and silent, Grigory came back with Dmitri and they went into the woods with their axes. You went with them. Curiosity, also to make sure they actually cut down your trees and didn't just wander off. The forest in winter is a different place, quiet, almost too quiet. Your footsteps crunch in the snow and the sound carries forever. Grigory moved through the trees like he was reading a book, stopping here and there, looking up at candidates, moving on. This one, he finally said, resting his hand on a pine that looked identical to every other pine around it. Why this one? Dmitri asked. Good question. You wanted to know too. Look at the bark. See how tight it is? No splits, no damage. Look at the crown. See how the branches are even? That means the tree grew straight. No fighting for light. And feel this. He scraped away some snow from the base. Trunk's the same width all the way up. That's what we want. Consistent diameter. He stepped back, raised his axe, and started cutting. The sound of an axe biting into frozen wood is sharp, clean. Each hit sent chips flying. Grigory worked in a rhythm, cut from one side, switch, cut from the other side, back and forth, creating a notch that went deeper and deeper into the trunk. Dmitri was doing the same on another tree. His technique was sloppier, more hacking, less precision, but he was learning. Dmitri! Grigory called without stopping his own work. You're swinging too hard. Let the axe do the work. Feel the weight of the head. Guide it. Don't force it. The kid adjusted. His next swings were better, more controlled. The chips he was making were bigger, cleaner. Good, Grigory said. Still chopping. Still in rhythm. Now you're learning. It took maybe 30 minutes to drop the first tree. When it fell, the sound echoed through the forest like thunder. Other trees shook, snow cascaded down from branches, and then silence again. Grigory walked the length of the fallen pine, measuring with his eyes, nodding to himself. This is good. Clean fall. No splitting. Mark this one for the base course. They cut 16 trees that day, 16 perfect pines, all roughly the same width, all cut in the depths of winter when the wood was at its best. Then they trimmed the branches and used horses to drag the logs back to your foundation. The logs lay in the snow like sleeping giants. Dmitri was exhausted. You could see it in the way he moved, careful and slow, like his whole body hurt. Cutting is the easy part, Grigory told him, not cruelly, just honest. Now we shape them. Shaping meant debarking first. They used draw knives for this, long blades with handles at both ends. You pull the blade along the log, shaving off bark in long strips. The fresh wood underneath is pale, almost white in the winter light. Bark holds moisture, Grigori explained while working. Moisture means rot. Rot means your house falls down in 10 years instead of 200. So off it comes, all of it. Dmitri was struggling with his draw knife. The bark kept catching. His strips were short and uneven. "You're pulling at the wrong angle," Grigori said, glancing over. "Here." He moved behind the kid, guided his hands. "Feel how the blade wants to follow the grain? Let it. Don't fight the wood. Work with it." The next pull was clean. A long strip of bark peeled away like skin. "There you go," Grigori said. "Now do that about 1,000 more times." The kid groaned but kept working. Once the logs were debarked, the real work started. The joinery, the rubka v ugal, cutting at the corner. This was where the magic happened, or where everything went wrong if you messed it up. Grigori selected the first log for the base, rolled it into position on the foundation stones. Then he measured exactly 20 centimeters from the end, marked it with a piece of charcoal, picked up his axe. "Watch," he told Dmitri. "This is the chasha, the bowl. This is what locks the logs together." He started cutting, not straight down, at an angle, creating a semicircular depression in the underside of the log. The curve was perfect, smooth, deep enough to cup the perpendicular log that would cross beneath it, but not so deep that it weakened the log. You watched him work, and it was like watching someone carve a sculpture. Every swing of the axe was precise, controlled. He wasn't hacking at the wood. He was revealing the bowl that was already there, hidden inside the log, waiting to be uncovered. "The chasha has to be perfect," he said while working. "Chips flying. Too shallow and the joint is weak. Too deep and you weaken the log. The wrong shape and the logs don't lock together right. Everything has to fit like a hand holding an egg." He finished the first bowl, ran his hand along the curve, checked it from different angles, then nodded and moved to the other end of the log to cut the second bowl. Dmitri was supposed to be cutting a bowl on his own log. You could hear him cursing under his breath. His bowl looked lumpy, uneven. "That's garbage," Grigori said, not looking up from his own work. "Start over." "But I've been working on this for—" "Start over." The kid grabbed his axe and started smoothing out his mistakes, trying to fix the lumpy bowl, making it worse. Grigori finally stopped his own work and walked over, looked at Dmitri's attempt, sighed. "You're thinking about the axe. Don't think about the axe. Think about the bowl. See it in your head. See the curve. Now remove everything that isn't the curve. That's all you're doing. Removing what doesn't belong." Dmitri stared at the log. You could practically see him trying to visualize the perfect bowl inside the imperfect wood. His next swing was better, more purposeful, less hacking. "There," Grigori said, "now you're seeing it." It took Dmitri 6 tries to cut a bowl that Grigori found acceptable. 6 bowls, 12 hours of work. His hands were blistered, his arms were shaking, but the final bowl was smooth, even, perfect. "Good," Grigori said, just that one word, but Dmitri grinned like he'd been given a fortune. They laid the first course of logs, 4 logs forming a square on top of the foundation stones, the bowls locked together at the corners. The fit was so tight you couldn't slide a knife blade between the logs. You literally couldn't. Ivan tried. The blade just stopped. "See?" Grigori said. "That's what we're after. No gaps, no cracks, no way for wind to get through. Arctic wind is mean. It'll find any weakness, any tiny gap, and it'll pour through and freeze you dead, so there are no gaps. Simple, simple, right. Simple like how brain surgery is simple." The second course of logs went on top of the first. More bowls, more precise cutting, and here's where it got clever. Each log was custom fit to the log below it. Grigory would roll a log into position, mark where it touched the log underneath, then take it down and carve the underside to match perfectly. This is called scribing, he explained. Every log is different diameter, different slight curve, different character, so every joint is different. You can't just cut the same bowl 20 times and call it good. Each one has to be fitted, matched, made to work with its specific partner. Dmitri was learning this the hard way. His scribed joints kept being slightly off, close but not perfect, and close wasn't good enough. Redo it, Grigory would say again and again, redo it. The kid was getting frustrated. You could see it. Why does it have to be so exact? It's close enough. Grigory stopped working, looked at him. You know what happens to close enough after 5 years of settling? What? Gaps. Drafts, cold air pouring in. Then the family you built this for freezes to death, and you get to live with that. Live with knowing you were too lazy to make it right. Live with knowing children died because you said close enough. Dmitri went pale, picked up his axe, fixed his joint without another word. Harsh? Maybe, but the man had a point. This wasn't carpentry as art. This was carpentry as survival. The stakes were as high as stakes get. The logs went up. 1 course, 2 courses, 5, 10. The Izba was taking shape. You could see the walls rising, see the space inside forming. It was real now, not just an idea, not just foundation stones and hope. An actual house. At course 12, Grigory did something interesting. He cut the bowls slightly shallower, not much, maybe a centimetre, maybe less. Why? You started to ask. House is going to settle, he said, as the wood dries, as the weight increases, as the seasons change. It's going to compress. The logs are going to squeeze together. If I make every joint perfect right now, they'll be too tight after settling. So I leave a tiny bit of room, just a tiny bit. And when the house settles, the joints get tighter, not looser, tighter. You just stared at him. How do you know how much room to leave? Experience, feel. You do this long enough, you develop a sense for it. Can't teach it, just have to learn it. He glanced at Dmitri. The kid was listening, taking mental notes. You'll get it eventually. After you build 10 or 20 houses, you'll start to feel it too. 10 or 20 houses. That's what it took to master this. 10 or 20 chances to get it right. 10 or 20 families trusting you with their lives. That was 5 years ago. You're standing in the Izba now, in year 5. The house has settled. You can see it if you look carefully. The logs are tighter together than they were when Grigory first laid them. The gaps he intentionally left? Gone, squeezed shut by time and weight. You walk over to one of the corner joints, run your hand along it. The fit is incredible. You can't see where one log ends and the next begins, can't feel a seam. You try the knife test again, grab a blade, try to slide it between logs. Can't, won't go, not even a little bit. The house is tight, solid, one piece. But back then, watching Grigory work, you didn't know if it would turn out this way. The walls reached 15 courses, 15 rings of logs, each one precisely fitted, each joint hand-carved to match its specific partner. Not a single nail, not a single metal plate, just wood and the friction between them. The log ends protruded at the corners, stuck out maybe 20 centimetres beyond the joint. Dmitri asked about those. Why leave them long? Why not cut them flush? Because they're gutters, Grigory said. Rain hits the wall, runs down. If the water reaches the joint, it can seep between the logs. But with the ends sticking out, the water runs off before it gets to the joint. The protruding ends shield the actual connection, keep it dry, keep it from rotting. Every detail, every single detail had a reason. Nothing was decorative. Everything was functional. Everything had to be because every mistake could kill someone. The top course went on. The last ring of logs. Grigory stood back, looking at the walls, checking them, walking around, touching joints, testing them. "Good," he finally said. "This is good work." Dmitri sagged with relief. His hands were raw, covered in blisters and cuts. But he'd done it, helped build an izba, learned how to make joints so tight that Arctic wind couldn't find a way through. "What happens now?" Ivan asked. "Now we put on the roof. Then we wait. Let the house settle. 5 years. It'll be fully settled. The logs will dry, shrink slightly. The weight of the roof will compress everything down. And all those joints I cut, they'll get tighter, lock together even harder. The house will actually get stronger as it ages, for the first 5 years anyway. 5 years of settling, of the logs finding their final positions, of the whole structure slowly, gradually compressing into itself like a fist closing. That was 5 years ago. You're standing in the izba now, in year 5. The house has settled. You can see it if you look carefully. The logs are tighter together than they were when Grigory first laid them. The gaps he intentionally left are gone, squeezed shut by time and weight and the natural behavior of wood. You walk over to one of the corner joints, run your hand along it. The fit is incredible. You can't see where one log ends and the next begins, can't feel a seam. The bolts have locked together so perfectly that it's like the logs grew this way, like nature carved these joints, and Grigory just uncovered them. You try the knife test again, grab a blade from the kitchen area, try to slide it between logs, can't, won't go, not even a little bit. The house is tight, solid, monolithic, one piece of wood shaped into a fortress against the cold. Outside, the wind is howling. Temperature is somewhere around -40. Wind chill makes it worse, deadly, fatal within minutes if you're exposed. But in here, the wind might as well not exist. The walls are so tight, so perfectly fitted that the cold can't find a way in. Grigory's joints hold. The protruding ends shed water and snow. The logs themselves, cut in winter when the sap was down, are dense and strong and showing no signs of rot. Your children play near the petch, oblivious to the engineering marvel surrounding them. To them, this is just home, just walls and a roof and a warm place to sleep. They don't know, don't understand, don't realise that every joint was carved by hand, that every bowl was shaped with nothing but an axe and knowledge and the understanding that mistakes equal death. They don't know about Dmitri's blistered hands, about Grigory's patience, about the 6 tries it took to carve one acceptable bowl, about the winter-cut timber and the draw knives and the precise measurements. They just know they're warm, safe, alive, and that's enough. That's the whole point. Ivan is checking one of the upper joints, doing what he does every spring and autumn, looking for cracks, looking for problems, looking for any sign that the house is failing. He finds nothing, never finds anything. Grigory's work is holding, will probably hold for another 195 years, maybe more. "Still tight," Ivan says, running his hand along a joint. You nod. Of course it's tight. Grigory didn't do close enough. He did perfect. Every time, every joint. Because he knew what close enough meant. Knew what happened when builders got lazy or rushed or decided good enough was good enough. Children coughing in smoke-filled rooms, families freezing in houses with drafts. Deaths that could have been prevented if someone had just taken the time to make it right. Grigory took the time, taught Dmitri to take the time, passed on the knowledge of how to see the bowl inside the log, how to remove everything that isn't the curve, how to fit wood to wood so perfectly that even a knife blade can't find the seam. The house creaks slightly, just settling, just the logs adjusting to the weight above them and the temperature around them. It's not a concerning sound. It's the sound of wood doing what wood does. Flexing, moving, adapting. Rigid structures crack under stress, but this house isn't rigid, it's flexible. The joints allow micro movements, the logs can shift slightly without breaking. The whole structure breathes, moves as one unit, stronger than steel brackets, more flexible than rigid connections. It's alive in a way. Not really alive, but not completely dead either. The wood remembers being a tree, remembers the forest, and it's using those memories to protect you now. The grain of the logs runs in spirals, natural spirals that add strength. The rings show the tree's age, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years of growth compressed into these walls, into this fortress. Your fortress, built by a man with an axe and his nephew with blistered hands, and knowledge passed down through so many generations that nobody remembers where it started. All of it working, all of it holding, all of it keeping your family alive. The wind screams outside, throws snow against the walls, tests the joints, looks for weakness, finds none, because Grigory didn't believe in weakness, didn't believe in close enough, didn't believe in good enough. He believed in perfect, and perfect meant your family survived. The logs hold, the joints lock tight, the house stands, and you're safe, warm, protected by wood and skill and the refusal to accept anything less than exactly right. Grandfather bangs his stick against the petch, wants something, water probably, or attention, hard to tell with him. Dmitri is probably still building izbas somewhere, probably teaching his own apprentice now, probably telling some kid with blistered hands to redo a joint for the 6th time, because close enough isn't good enough, passing it on. The knowledge, the skill, the understanding that every bowl matters, every measurement counts, every joint is the difference between life and death. Your hand is still on the corner joint. You can feel the solidity of it, the permanence. 200 years, Grigory said, maybe more. You believe him. This house will outlive you, outlive your children, all because a man with an axe knew how to see bowls in logs. The wind howls outside. The cold presses, but Grigory's joints don't care. They're too tight to let anything through, and you're safe. Your home, your fortress, built to last centuries, one perfect bowl at a time. Perfect joints, perfect logs, but there's still gaps between them, tiny gaps, gaps that Arctic wind would exploit without mercy. Those gaps needed sealing, and for that, you needed moss, the right moss. Let me tell you about the week that almost killed you. 1 year before the house was built, late summer, your mother-in-law knows which moss will keep your family alive and which will let them freeze. The difference? You can't see it just by looking. That's the problem. We go today, Babushka announced before dawn, to the bog. The bog. 2 hours into the taiga, where bears outnumber people and getting lost means dying slowly among the mosquitoes. Can't we just use moss from around here? She looked at you like you'd suggested eating dirt. You want your house to rot in 5 years. Use any moss. You want it to last 200. Come with me. So you went. You and Babushka and your daughter Anya, who was 7 then, and 2 neighbour women who were also building houses, 5 females walking into the forest with baskets and cloth bags and a healthy fear of bears. Stay close, Babushka said. Bear sees 5 women together. He usually leaves us alone. Bear sees 1 woman alone. She's breakfast. Comforting. The taiga in late summer, thick green, alive with mosquitoes the size of your thumbnail. Anya swatted at insects. Why can't father get the moss? Men know trees, women know moss, Babushka said. Simple fact. Irina, a neighbour woman, laughed. My husband tried once, brought back garbage that crumbled. I threw it at him. Everyone laughed. Babushka stopped every few minutes, knelt, examined moss, shook her head, moved on. 20 times this happened. What's wrong with that one? You asked. Wrong kind, wrong colour, wrong moisture, wrong everything. Finally, after 3 hours, you reached the bog. And okay, this place was different. The ground was spongy. Each step made water seep up around your shoes. The air smelled like earth and decay and something sharp that made your nose wrinkle. Here, Babushka said, satisfaction in her voice. This is good bog. The moss here was different, lighter, fluffier. It grew in thick carpets of pale green that looked almost white in some spots. Babushka knelt down, grabbed a handful, squeezed it. Water poured out. Lots of water. The moss compressed to almost nothing in her fist, then slowly expanded back when she opened her hand. See, she said. Watch. She squeezed it again. Again the water came out. Again it compressed. Again it expanded. This moss drinks water, holds it, releases it. When it's dry, it's light, almost weighs nothing. When it's wet, it holds 20 times its weight, maybe more. You grabbed some yourself, squeezed it, watched the water stream out. The moss in your hand went from fluffy to flat. When you stopped squeezing, it puffed back up like magic. That's weird, Anya said, trying it herself. That's perfect, Babushka corrected. This moss goes between your logs. When the air is dry, the moss is dry and small. When the air is wet, the moss swells up and seals tight. It adjusts, breathes, keeps the wood from rotting because it wicks moisture away. She started gathering, pulling up handfuls of the moss, shaking off excess water, putting it in her basket. You copied her, so did the other women, so did Anya, who was actually pretty good at this. Not that moss, Babushka barked at Irina, who'd grabbed a darker patch. That's the wrong kind. See the colour? Too dark. That one doesn't have the right properties. It's all moss. It's all bread too, but rye bread and wheat bread aren't the same thing, are they? Irina grumbled, but moved to a different patch. You were gathering steadily when you noticed something. The moss smelled weird, not bad, just medicinal, sharp, clean. Why does it smell like this? You asked. Phenols, Babushka said. Then, seeing your confused look, antiseptic. This moss kills bad things, bacteria, fungi, things that make wood rot. During the last war, when the soldiers ran out of bandages, you know what the doctors used? No. This moss, sphagnum moss, packed it into wounds, stopped infection better than cloth, better than half the medicine they had, saved lives. You looked at the moss in your hand with new respect. This wasn't just insulation, this was medicine, this was protection, this was giving your house an immune system. How do you know all this? Anya asked. Babushka smiled. Rare thing, that smile. My mother taught me, her mother taught her, her mother taught her, goes back and back. Before anyone could read or write, women knew moss, knew which kind healed, which kind sealed, which kind lasted. We passed it down. Mother to daughter, grandmother to granddaughter, this knowledge kept families alive. She grabbed another handful, inspected it, approved it, added it to her basket. The men build the house, she continued, but women make it live. The moss we gather today, it'll outlive us, outlive our children, still be protecting that house when our great-grandchildren are old. Heavy thought for a warm summer day in a bog. You gathered for hours, back hurting, hands waterlogged, bugs everywhere. Then you saw it. Brown bear, 300 pounds of muscle and teeth, maybe 20 feet away, standing, looking directly at you. Everyone froze. Don't run. Running triggers chase. Just stand. 5 women and a child, staring at death. The bear huffed, took a step toward you. Babushka's voice came out steady, loud. Go on, brother bear. We're just getting moss. Nothing here for you. Go find berries. Leave us alone. The bear stopped, tilted its head like it was considering. Your heart hammered so hard you thought it might break your ribs. 10 seconds, 20, the bear watching, you watching back. Then it turned, ambled away into the trees, disappeared. Nobody moved for a full minute. Does talking always work? Irina whispered, voice shaking. Usually, Babushka said, already back to gathering moss. Sometimes they eat you anyway. Your hands were shaking so badly you could barely grip the moss, but you kept gathering because this was survival. This was what women did. This isn't enough, Babushka announced, looking at the full baskets. We've been gathering for 3 hours. And we need a week's worth. Every gap between every log needs moss. We've got maybe 1/10, maybe. So you went back. Day after day, 7 days total, arms dead, hands cramped, watching for bears every minute. The moss had to be cleaned after, spread out, picked through for sticks and bugs, then dried in the sun for 2 weeks while Anya complained about being bored. Bored in a warm house or interesting while freezing? Babushka asked. Anya chose boredom. When it was finally dry enough, Babushka squeezed a handful. It compressed easily. Released, compressed, released. Good, she said. Now we store it. They stored it in the driest part of Babushka's house, wrapped in cloth, protected from moisture, waiting for the day when the logs would be ready for it. That day came 6 months later. The walls were up. 15 courses of logs. Grigory had finished his joints. The logs were sitting there with gaps between them. Small gaps, but gaps nonetheless. Time for moss, Babushka announced. You and Anya and Irina and the other women gathered at the building site with baskets of dried moss and wooden tools. Special tools. Thin pieces of hardwood shaped like fat knives. Blunt, for packing. Or watch, Babushka said. She took a handful of moss, placed it in the gap between 2 logs, then took her wooden tool and pushed, packed it in, firm but not crushing, creating a seal, a continuous seal around the entire log. Not too tight, she said. Too tight and you compress it too much. It can't expand when it needs to. Not tight enough and there's gaps. Air gets through. Has to be just right. Just right. Always just right. Everything in this house had to be just right or people died. You copied her technique. Take moss, place it in gap, pack it with the wooden tool, firm, even, continuous. Your hands learned the feel of it, the right amount of pressure, the right density. Anya was helping too. Her small hands were actually good for this. She could reach spots the adults couldn't, could pack moss into corners and tight spaces. Good girl, Babushka told her. You're learning. Someday you'll teach your daughter, and she'll teach her daughter, and the knowledge continues. The work was slow, tedious. Each log had 2 gaps, one above and one below. 15 courses of logs meant 30 gaps to pack, and each gap needed to be packed around the entire perimeter of the house. You worked for 3 days straight, packing moss, your hands cramped. Your neck hurt from bending over, but the gaps filled. The moss created a continuous seal, light and fluffy when dry, ready to expand and seal tight when the humidity rose. This moss, Babushka said while working, it breathes. That's the secret. Modern people, they seal everything tight. No air, no moisture movement, just trapped. dead air, dead moisture. That's how you get rot. But this moss, it lets the wood breathe, takes excess moisture from inside the house, releases it outside, keeps the logs healthy, keeps them from decaying. You packed more moss, pressed it in, made sure it was continuous. No gaps, no breaks in the seal. The phenols in the moss, Babushka continued, they keep bacteria away, keep fungi from growing. It's like the moss is guarding the wood, fighting off anything that wants to hurt it. Your house doesn't just have walls, it has a living defense system. By the third day, every gap was packed, every joint was sealed. The moss filled the spaces between logs like a fluffy green guardian. Babushka walked around the house, checking, pressing the moss here and there, testing it, looking for spots that needed more, finding a few, adding more moss, making it perfect. This will last, she said finally. Long as the house stands, this moss will do its job. Won't need replacing, won't need maintenance. It'll just work year after year, decade after decade, protecting the wood, protecting the family. That was 5 years ago. You're standing in the house now, middle of winter. The gaps between logs are invisible. The moss has done its job, expanded and contracted with the seasons, kept the wood breathing, kept the rot away. You run your hand along a joint. The moss is there, soft and springy, still working after 5 years. Will still be working after 50, all because women walked into a bog, spent a week gathering the right moss, made sure every detail was right. Anya is helping her grandmother with something, spinning wool probably, learning, the chain unbroken. Your hands remember the bog, the smell, the careful packing, the certainty that you were building something that would outlast you. The house breathes around you. The moss facilitates it, keeps everything balanced, keeps the wood healthy. Babushka was right. The men built the house, but the women made it live. The wind presses against the walls, tests the seal, finds none. The moss holds, the house breathes, the family survives, one handful at a time, walls tight, moss sealed, but all of that sits on something that seems impossible the first time someone explains it to you, the foundation, or rather the lack of one. Back then when construction was starting, you had questions, a lot of questions. Present day, middle of winter. The house is 6 inches higher than it was in November. You know, because you've been tracking it, a nail in the door frame, a mark you made, watching it slowly, impossibly rise 6 inches, the entire house, lifted by the frozen ground underneath. Your modern brain says this is insane. Houses don't float. Houses sit on foundations anchored deep into bedrock. Houses stay put. This house doesn't know that. The ground freezes, expands, pushes up with forces that could crush concrete, and your house just rides along, goes up, stays level, acts like this is completely normal, because it is, has been for 5 years now, 5 winters of lifting, 5 springs of settling back down. You remember when Grigory first explained this? Remember thinking he'd lost his mind? Ivan opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. But won't the house just slide around, fall over, something? Nope. How? Because the house floats. Houses don't float. This one does. You were standing there listening to this conversation, and honestly, you were with Ivan. This sounded insane. Your entire home, your family's survival, sitting on a handful of rocks, just sitting there. Nothing anchoring it down, nothing keeping it stable except gravity and hope. Grigory must have seen the panic on your faces, because he sighed and sat down on one of the foundation stones he'd already placed. All right, let me explain this, because I can see you're both about to have a breakdown. He picked up a stick, drew in the dirt. When winter comes, the ground freezes. You know this, but it doesn't just freeze. It expands. Water turns to ice. Ice takes up more space than water. The ground literally lifts up. You following? You nodded. Everyone knew this. Frozen ground pushed things around, shifted them, moved them. How much does it lift? Grigory asked. Didn't wait for an answer. Depends on the winter. Bad winter. Ground can lift a foot, maybe more. That's a foot of pressure pushing up on anything sitting on the ground. He drew more in the dirt. Now, that pressure, it's not gentle. It's not like someone nudging you. It's like, imagine 50,000 pounds pressing on every square foot. More than that sometimes. The ground is trying to crush anything in its way. 50,000 pounds per square foot. The number was too big to make sense. You just stared at him. So, Grigory continued, you got two choices. First choice, you dig deep. Real deep, below where the frost can reach. Anchor your house to bedrock or unfrozen ground. That's what they do in cities, rich people houses, churches, big buildings. And the second choice? You let it happen. Silence. Just the wind in the trees and the sound of your brain trying to process what he just said. Let it happen, Ivan repeated. Let the ground freeze, let it expand, let it lift. Your house just rides along, goes up when the ground goes up, comes back down when the ground thaws in spring. The whole structure moves as one piece, together, unified. That sounds insane. Yeah, everyone says that, but it works. Been working for hundreds of years, will work for hundreds more. He stood up. Pointed at the foundation stones he'd already placed. 4 chunks of granite, each one about the size of a large barrel, flat on top, positioned at what would be the 4 corners of the house. These stones, he said, they're not anchors, they're platforms. They distribute the weight of the house over a larger area, so the first logs don't sink into the ground, but they don't go deep. They just sit on the surface. Maybe I'll put a thin layer of sand under them to get them perfectly level, but that's it, surface level. You walked over to one of the stones, touched it. It was solid, heavy, unmovable, but it was just sitting there, on top of the ground, nothing holding it in place except its own weight. What about between the stone and the logs? You asked. Good question. Grigory smiled. Rare thing. We put birch bark, a layer of it. Keeps moisture from wicking up from the stone into the wood. Wood touches wet stone. Wood rots. Birch bark is waterproof, natural barrier, keeps the wood dry. And when the ground freezes, the whole house lifts, all together, all at once. The stones lift, the logs lift, the roof lifts, everything. But because it's all connected, because those log joints are so tight, because the whole structure is basically one solid piece, it just rides the wave, goes up. Stays level, comes back down in spring. Ivan was shaking his head. I don't believe you. A house can't just float around like that. Not floating like a boat, floating like a raft on a river. The river rises, the raft rises, river falls, raft falls, but the raft stays level, stays intact, doesn't break apart just because the water moved. And you've done this before? Every house I've ever built, 50 houses, maybe more, all still standing, all still level, all still protecting families. He walked over to another foundation stone, kicked it gently. It didn't budge. See this? Granite. Chosen specifically. Granite doesn't crack under pressure. Other stones might split when the ground pushes up on them, but granite? Granite's been sitting in mountains for millions of years, getting squeezed by forces that make frost heave look like a gentle hug. It can handle this. What if the house lands crooked when it settles back down? doesn't happen. Ground thaws evenly. House settles evenly. I've seen it happen dozens of times. Spring comes, snow melts, ground thaws, house settles maybe half an inch per day. So slow you don't even notice. And it settles level because the weight is distributed evenly. The design ensures it. You wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this would work, but the idea of your house just floating around on a few stones while the ground heaved and pushed with the force of thousands of pounds seemed absolutely bonkers. What happens to houses with deep foundations? You asked. You said rich people dig deep. That works, right? Grigory's expression darkened. Sometimes, if they dig deep enough and build strong enough, but most people can't afford that, can't afford to dig that deep, can't afford the materials for a foundation that strong, so they try halfway measures, dig down a few feet, pour some concrete, anchor it down, and when the frost heave hits, those foundations crack, concrete splits, stone crumbles, the house above gets pulled apart because half of it is being lifted by the ground and half of it is anchored to broken foundation. I've seen it, seen houses torn in half, walls cracking, roofs collapsing, all because someone tried to hold still against a force you can't fight. He looked at both of you. The secret isn't fighting the ground. The secret is working with it. Let it move. Let your house move with it. Don't resist. Don't anchor. Just float. And people inside, you asked, they can feel this? The house moving? Nope. Movement's too gradual, too slow. You could put a cup of water on a table and it wouldn't spill. Doors still open and close normal. Dishes don't rattle. You wouldn't know it was happening unless you measured the house height every day. And even then, we're talking about inches. Slow inches. That same afternoon, Grigory placed the rest of the foundation stones. 8 total, 4 at the corners, 4 more along the walls for extra support, each one positioned carefully, levelled precisely with a thin layer of sand underneath. Then he laid the birch bark, sheets of it, overlapping, creating a waterproof barrier between stone and wood. The bark was flexible, durable, would last as long as the house lasted. This bark, he said while laying it, it's like a skin, keeps the stone and wood from touching directly, keeps moisture from travelling up. If wood sits on wet stone for years, it rots from the bottom up. The bark prevents that. He smoothed the bark, made sure it covered the entire top surface of each stone. Then he started placing the first course of logs. The massive logs settled onto the bark with a solid sound, weight pressing down, but the stones didn't sink, didn't shift, just held steady, supporting the load. There, Grigory said, standing back. That's your foundation, simple, shallow, completely unanchored, and it'll outlast any deep foundation you could build, because it works with nature instead of fighting it. That was 5 years ago, 5 winters of frost heave, 5 cycles of freezing and thawing. The foundation hasn't failed, not even close. You've watched it happen every year now. Every winter, the ground freezes, the house lifts, maybe 6 inches by February. You mark it on a nail in the doorframe, watch it rise slowly, gradually, 6 inches, pushed up by forces that would crush concrete. But your foundation just rides it, lifts with it, stays level. You can walk around during the worst of winter and everything works. Doors open smooth, nothing cracks, nothing breaks. Ivan was sceptical the first winter, kept checking, kept waiting for disaster. Never happened. House lifted smooth, stayed level, kept working. By spring, when the thaw came, he was a believer. The house settles back down in May, 1/4 inch per day, back to where it started. And the cycle starts again. Grandfather has lived through 60 of these cycles, takes it for granted now, doesn't even notice. The forces are massive, £50,000 per square foot, like parking 10 cars on every square foot of ground. Your house just rides it. Up we go, down we come. No drama. You're standing outside now, middle of winter. The ground is frozen solid. Somewhere down there, permafrost is expanding, pushing up with forces that could bend steel. Your house sits above it all, 6 inches higher than it'll be in spring. Level, solid, unconcerned. 8 stones and some birch bark. That's all it took. Simple, elegant, perfect, working with nature, not against it. Inside, Anya is asking about something normal. Every day, she has no idea the house is floating 6 inches higher, has no idea any of this is happening. That's how good the design is. 8 stones are enough when you know what you're doing. And Grigory knew the foundation holds, the house floats, the family survives, 1 stone at a time. So, floating foundation, tight walls, warm pitch, everything working below and beside you. But above, that's where things got really interesting. That's where a drunk guy and his nervous apprentice created something that sounds impossible. Let me tell you about the roof. The roof guy's name was Stepan, and he showed up drunk. Not falling down drunk, just the kind of drunk where you can tell someone's been drinking but they can still function. He smelled like vodka and wet dog, and he kept humming while he worked. "Is he okay?" you asked Grigory, who was supervising the whole construction. "Stepan? He's fine. Always drinks before doing roofs. Says it steadies his hands." Does it? No idea. But he's never fallen off a roof yet, so who am I to judge? Stepan had an apprentice too, kid named Dmitri, about 19, skinny, nervous, clearly not drunk, which made him the more nervous of the two. "First thing," Stepan announced, climbing onto the log rafters like he was walking on solid ground. "We need bark, lots of bark. Birch bark, best stuff in the world for keeping water out." "How much bark?" Ivan asked. Stepan squinted at the roof, did some math in his head. "All of it. That's not a number." "Sure it is. All. Every piece of birch bark we can find. This roof is big, needs a lot of bark. So you went bark hunting, you and Ivan and young Dmitri and half the village apparently, because word got around that Stepan needed bark and everybody wanted to help, or watch, mostly watch. Birch trees in spring are perfect for harvesting bark. The sap is rising, the bark is loose. You can peel it off in big sheets without hurting the tree too much. Well, you hurt it a little, but the tree usually recovers. Like this, Babushka said, showing you the technique. She made a vertical cut in the bark with a knife, then a horizontal cut at the top and bottom. Then she worked her fingers under the bark and pulled. The bark came off in a sheet, maybe 2 feet long, a foot wide, flexible. You could roll it up like paper. "See?" she said. "Easy. Now we need about 500 of these." 500. Great. The bark collection took 2 days. Your hands got sticky with sap. Your back hurt from bending over. You got yelled at by a squirrel who was apparently very invested in that particular birch tree. But you got the bark, stacks of it, rolled up, stored in a dry place until Stepan was ready for it. He was ready 3 days later. Less drunk this time, more focused. He climbed onto the rafters with young Dmitri following behind him like a nervous shadow. "Watch what I do," Stepan told the kid. "This is how you make a roof that lasts 200 years. You mess this up, water gets in. Water gets in, wood rots. Wood rots, roof collapses. Roof collapses, everyone dies. So pay attention." The kid went even paler than he already was. Stepan started laying bark. He overlapped the sheets like shingles. Each piece covered part of the piece below it. Water would hit the top piece, run down, hit the next piece, run down, hit the next piece, run down, never getting a chance to seep through. "This bark," he explained while working, "it's got natural oils in it, resins, stuff that repels water like a duck's feathers. Water just slides right off, and the bark is flexible, doesn't crack in winter, doesn't rot in summer, just does its job for decades." He secured each piece with small wooden pegs. No nails. Nails would puncture the waterproof layer. Wooden pegs held it down without compromising the seal. Young Dmitri was trying to copy him on the other side of the roof. His pieces were crooked, overlapping wrong. Stepan looked over, sighed, climbed across the rafters with the balance of a cat and ripped half of Dmitri's work off. "Again," he said, "do it right or don't do it at all." The kid looked like he might cry, but he started over. The bark layer took 4 days, every inch of the roof covered, overlapping, sealed, waterproof. Stepan tested it by pouring buckets of water on sections. The water ran off, didn't soak through, didn't pool, just ran down to the edges and dripped off. "Good," he said. "Now for the clay." Oh, the clay. This wasn't the same clay that went into the petch. This was rougher, mixed with chopped straw, mixed with animal hair, anything that would bind it together and give it structure. "The clay does 3 things," Stepan said, mixing a batch in a large wooden trough. "You were helping because apparently everyone helps with everything when building a house. First, it's extra waterproofing. Water gets past the bark somehow. The clay stops it. Second, it's thermal mass. Absorbs heat in summer, releases it in winter, keeps temperature stable. Third, it's a growing medium." Growing medium? For the grass, the sod, top layer. You'll see. He started spreading clay on the bark. Thick layer, maybe 2 inches, maybe 3. He used a wooden tool to smooth it out, make it even. Young Dmitri helped, though his sections were lumpier than Stepan's. "Doesn't have to be perfect," Stepan said. "The sod will hide the lumps. Just needs to be thick enough to hold moisture and support roots." The clay work took another 3 days. Your arms were dead by the end of it. Hauling buckets of clay up to the roof, spreading it, smoothing it, repeat, repeat, repeat. When it was done, the roof looked like it was covered in mud, which it was, but organized mud, purposeful mud. Mud with a job. "Now we wait," Stepan announced. "Let it dry a bit. Not all the way dry, just firm enough that we can walk on it without sinking. Then we bring the sod." Sod. Pieces of meadow, cut out in rectangles, grass and roots and dirt all together. Living tiles. You went with the sod cutting crew. Turned out cutting sod is an art. You can't just hack at the ground. You need to cut it in specific dimensions, specific thickness. Thick enough to have good roots, thin enough that you can actually carry it. The tool for this looked like a flat shovel, but sharper. You'd mark out a rectangle, maybe a foot wide, maybe 2 feet long, then you'd cut around it, down about 3 inches, then slide the tool under it and lift. If you did it right, you got a perfect piece of sod. Grass on top. Roots and dirt on bottom, intact, ready to transplant. If you did it wrong, the whole thing crumbled into a mess of dirt and dead grass and disappointment. You did it wrong approximately 30 times before you got the hang of it. Anya was actually good at this. Her small size meant she could get better leverage somehow. She'd cut pieces that came up perfect, show them to you with this proud smile. "I'm better at sod than you are, Mama." "Yes, dear, you are." The sod had to be kept alive during transport. Couldn't let the roots dry out. Couldn't let them get too compressed. You wrapped them in wet cloth, loaded them carefully onto a cart, moved them to the building site as quickly as possible. Stepan was waiting on the roof. The clay had firmed up just enough. He took the first piece of sod from you, placed it on the clay, pressed it down gently. The roots made contact with the clay. The grass stayed on top. Perfect, he said. Now about 500 more of these. Why was everything 500 of something? Laying the sod was like doing a giant puzzle. Each piece had to fit against the next piece. No gaps, no overlaps. Just a continuous carpet of living grass covering the entire roof. Stepan and young Dmitri worked from the bottom up, laying sod in rows, each row locked against the row above it, the roots intertwined, the grass continued. By the time they finished, you couldn't tell where one piece ended and the next began. It looked like someone had just draped a meadow over your house, because that's basically what they'd done. This grass, Stepan said, sitting on the completed roof with his legs dangling off the edge. It'll grow. Put down deeper roots into the clay. Spread. Fill in any small gaps. In a month, this'll be one solid piece. One living roof. What about in winter? Ivan asked. Winter's keen when it gets good. Watch. That first summer after construction. The roof was green, bright green. The grass grew. Wildflowers showed up somehow. Little yellow ones, little white ones. Bees visited, butterflies landed on your roof and drank nectar from flowers growing on your house. Anya loved it, would go outside and just stare up at the roof. We have flowers on our house. Yes, we do. Can I pick them? No, leave them. They're part of the roof. She pouted, but left them alone. The grass needed rain to survive. Luckily, rain happened. A lot. The sod would soak up water like a sponge. The clay underneath would hold it. The roots would drink it. The grass would grow thick and lush. In summer, this was cooling. The grass would transpire, release moisture into the air, create evaporative cooling. The roof stayed cooler than if it was just bare wood or bark. But the real magic happened in winter. The first snow fell in November, light dusting at first. The grass caught it, held it. The snow settled into the grass and just stayed there. More snow fell. The grass held that too. The sod roof became a thick white blanket. By February, something weird happened. The house got quieter, warmer, like someone had wrapped it in a giant blanket made of silence. Is it supposed to be this heavy? You asked Ivan, watching more snow accumulate. He shrugged. Heavy. Really heavy. Stepan had mentioned this. Something about the weight. 20 tons, he'd said. Maybe more by the end of winter. 20 tons, sitting on your roof. And here's the insane part. The house loved it. You'd expected creaking, groaning, signs of stress. Instead, the walls got tighter. The moss between the logs compressed. Every joint locked harder. The whole structure became more solid under the crushing weight. Shouldn't that collapse the house? You asked Grigory when he came by to check on things. Nope, that's the genius. The weight presses down on the walls. The walls press down on the moss chinking. The moss compresses, gets tighter, seals better. The weight makes the whole structure more solid, not less. You just stared at him. Think about it, he said. The logs want to separate a little as they dry, as they shrink, but the weight of the roof is constantly pressing them together, forcing the joints tight, compressing the moss. The heavier the roof, the tighter the house. It's counterintuitive, but it works. Counterintuitive. That was putting it mildly. But he was right. The house did feel more solid after that first winter. The walls were tighter. The moss was compressed into a perfect seal. No drafts, no cold spots, just constant, even warmth from the pitch. The snow on the roof acted as insulation. Snow has air pockets in it. Air is one of the best insulators. The thicker the snow, the better the insulation. Stepan had claimed an R value of 40 to 50 with the full system. Snow, sod, clay, bark, all working together, all doing their jobs. Your modern roof with its fancy insulation probably hits R30 if you're lucky. This roof, with free materials from nature, hits 50, and it's alive. That's the weird part. It's a living roof. The grass grows in summer, dormant in winter. The roots hold everything together. The ecosystem up there has worms and bugs and probably mice. You have mice living in your roof, and that's fine. That's normal. That's how it works. Do the mice get inside? Anya had asked when she learned about this. No, the clay layer keeps them out. They can live in the sod, but they can't get through the clay. And even if they did, the bark would stop them. What if they eat the bark? Mice don't eat bark, at least not birch bark. Tastes bad, has those oils in it. She seemed satisfied with this answer. The roof sits up there now, middle of winter, covered in probably 3 feet of snow. The weight is enormous, but the log rafters support it without complaint. The snow insulates better than anything you could buy. The sod underneath is dormant but alive, waiting for spring. The clay is doing its job. The bark keeps everything dry. 4 layers, simple, effective, working together. When spring comes, the snow will melt, the grass will wake up, the wildflowers will bloom, and your roof will be a meadow again. You're lying in your modern bed now, in your house with the engineered roof. That roof cost thousands, has to be replaced every 20 years. That roof up there on the Isba, built with bark and clay and grass, will last 200 years, costs nothing, and it works better. The petch radiates warmth. The walls hold tight, the roof presses down with its 20 tons of living insulation, and you're safe, protected by layers of genius, all of it simple, all of it perfect. Stepan probably built 100 roofs like this, teaching nervous apprentices who would grow up to build their own roofs, knowledge passing down, because they worked, because they had to. The roof holds, the snow insulates, the grass waits for spring, and underneath it all, you're warm. Protected by 20 tons of genius, 1 layer at a time, peck, walls, foundation, roof, all the physical pieces working together. But there was something else, something you can't touch, something that might not even be real, something that made all the difference. Back to the beginning, the first night in the new house. The first night in the new house, Babushka did something strange. She took a small piece of bread from dinner, not much, just a crust and a pinch of salt, walked over to the space behind the petch where the shadows gathered thick and nobody liked to go. "Here, grandfather," she said softly to the darkness. "Here's your welcome. Please watch over this house. Please keep us safe." She placed the bread and salt on the floor, then backed away, respectful, like she was in the presence of someone important. "What are you doing?" you whispered. "Feeding the domovoi, the house spirit. Every house has one. If we don't feed him, don't respect him, he'll make our lives miserable." You looked at Ivan. Ivan shrugged. His mother had always done this. He'd grown up with it, thought it was normal. There's a spirit living behind our stove, not just behind the stove, in the house, the walls, the roof, everywhere. He watches everything, sees everything, judges everything. Judges? The work we did, the craftsmanship. If he finds it good, he blesses us. If he finds it shoddy, he curses us. Simple. That night you couldn't sleep, kept thinking about some spirit watching you, judging you, living in your walls. It was creepy, but also, it made a weird kind of sense, because here's what happened over the next few months. Whenever something went wrong, Babushka would blame the domovoi. Whenever something went right, she'd thank him. Tool went missing? Domovoy moved it, food spoiled unexpectedly, Domovoy was displeased, fire burned perfectly, Domovoy was happy. At first you thought it was just superstition, just an old woman's nonsense. Then you started noticing something else. Whenever Ivan did sloppy work around the house, something would go wrong. Not immediately, but within days. A tool would break, a shelf would collapse, something. The domovoy is angry, Babushka would say. Fix your work properly or he'll make things worse. And Ivan would go back, redo whatever he'd done sloppily. Do it right, do it carefully, do it to the standards that would satisfy an invisible critic living in the walls. After that, things would work fine again. Coincidence? Maybe. Probably. But it happened enough times that Ivan started doing things right the first time, just in case. I don't want to redo joints at midnight because some angry house spirit is throwing tools at me, he'd grumble. The domovoy wasn't just Babushka's belief. Everyone in the village believed. Everyone had stories. Old Dmitri, 2 houses down, his domovoy supposedly warned him about a fire. Woke him up in the middle of the night by making noise. Dmitri got up, investigated, found hot coals that had rolled out of the petch, put them out before they caught the house on fire. The domovoy saved my life, he'd tell anyone who'd listen. I owe him everything. Was it really a spirit, or was it that Dmitri was a light sleeper and heard something and his brain made up a story to explain it? Who knows, but he believed it, and he left bread and salt behind his stove every week without fail. The domovoy was described as small, hairy, about the size of a child, with thick fur covering his hands and feet, only his eyes and nose visible through all that hair. He'd emerge at night when everyone was asleep, run his hairy hands along the joints, check the moss, test the rafters, make sure everything was built properly, make sure the family was maintaining things, make sure nobody was getting lazy. If he found good work, he'd bless the house. The fire would burn well, the food would stay fresh longer, the children would be healthy, the livestock would thrive. If he found bad work, tools would disappear, food would spoil, someone would get sick, the fire would refuse to light properly, small disasters that added up to big problems. How do you know if he's happy or angry? You asked Babushka once. You know, you just know. The house feels different. If he's happy, everything flows easy. If he's angry, everything's hard. You fight with small things all day. That's just life. Some days are easy, some are hard. She looked at you with those old, knowing eyes. And why do you think some days are easy and some are hard? The domovoy. He makes it so. There was no arguing with this logic. The interesting thing, the domovoy belief made people better craftsmen, not through magic, through fear. When Grigory was cutting those joints, he'd cut them 5 times if necessary. Why? Because he believed his dead grandfather was watching, his dead great-grandfather, every ancestor who'd ever built anything, all compressed into one hairy spirit judging his work. You don't disappoint ghosts? You don't do sloppy work when dead relatives are keeping score? Stepan would go back up in the rain to fix bark that was laid wrong, not because you'd noticed, you hadn't, but he'd noticed, and he believed something else had noticed too. The domovoy knows, he'd say, climbing up there in the wet. He always knows. Was it real? Who cares? It worked. Young Grigori's nephew would work until his hands bled, not for his uncle, for invisible ancestors. That ancestral disapproval hit harder than any master's anger. The domovoy system created builders who were their own harshest critics, who held themselves to impossible standards because they believed their dead ancestors were watching. judging, keeping track. Modern building has inspectors, building codes, legal liability. If you do sloppy work, you might get fined, might get sued, might lose your license, but you might not. You might get away with it, might pass inspection, might have the problems show up years later when it's not your problem anymore. The domovoi system, you never get away with it, never, because the spirit knows, always knows, and he lives in the house with the family you built it for. If your work is bad, he'll make their lives hell, and they'll know it was you, they'll know you cut corners, and they'll tell everyone, and nobody will ever hire you again. Also, your own domovoi might get angry, because bad craftsmen have angry domovois. It's cause and effect. Do shoddy work, your domovoi curses you, your life becomes miserable. Everyone knows why. Nobody wants to be near you because your bad luck might spread. It's accountability through supernatural belief, and it worked better than any modern system. You started believing too, not in a literal way maybe, but in a practical way. You'd sweep the floor every day, not just because it needed sweeping, but because the domovoi demanded cleanliness. You'd keep the petch immaculate, not just because it was smart, but because a dirty petch angered the spirits. When you moved into the house, the builders had performed a ritual. Grigory, Stepan, Pyotr, the stove builder, all of them. They'd taken coals from Babushka's old hearth, carried them carefully to your new petch, used those coals to light the first fire in your new house. This transfers the domovoi, Grigory explained. Your family's spirit moves with you from old house to new house. He's been protecting your family for generations. Now he'll protect them here. What if we hadn't transferred him? Ivan asked. Then you'd have an angry domovoi in your old house with no one to protect, and no domovoi in your new house. Both bad situations. The spirit needs a family. The family needs a spirit. You transfer him, honor him, and everything works. They'd also placed a small offering in the foundation before the first log went down, a coin, some grain, a piece of bread wrapped in cloth, buried it under the corner where the domovoi would eventually live. For prosperity, Grigory said. For blessing, for luck. The domovoi sees this offering first thing, knows the family is respectful, knows they honour tradition. He settles in happy. These weren't empty rituals. They were psychological tools, ways to ensure that everyone involved in building the house took it seriously, treated it as sacred work, because you weren't just building shelter, you were building a vessel for a spirit, a home for your ancestors' watchful presence. If you believed that, you'd cut every joint perfectly, pack every bit of moss carefully, lay every piece of bark precisely, because your ancestors were watching, and disappointing them was worse than any earthly punishment. Grandfather had his own relationship with the domovoi. He'd talk to the spirits sometimes, not loud, just quiet conversations when he thought nobody was listening. "Watch over these children," you heard him say once. "Keep them safe. Keep them warm. They're good children. They deserve protection." He'd been talking to the empty space behind the petch, where the shadows lived, where the domovoi supposedly dwelled. Was he senile? Crazy? Or was he continuing a tradition that had kept his family alive for generations? You decided it didn't matter. Let him talk to spirits. Let him believe. His belief had standards that kept houses standing for centuries. His belief had quality control that no modern system could match. The domovoi was also a weather prophet. If he was restless at night, moving things, making noise, it meant a storm was coming. If he was quiet and content, the weather would be good. Babushka could predict storms 3 days out just by listening to the house at night, hearing how the domovoi moved, how he sounded. "Big storm coming," she'd announce. "How do you know?" "The domovoi is restless. Hear him? He's warning us." You'd listen, hear something. Maybe wind, maybe the house settling, maybe your imagination. But 3 days later, a storm would hit. She was rarely wrong. Was she really hearing a spirit, or was she hearing subtle changes in air pressure and wind patterns that her experienced ear had learned to interpret? Did it matter? The predictions worked. That's what mattered. The whole system worked. The belief in the domovoi created builders who wouldn't accept good enough, created families who maintained their homes perfectly, created a culture where sloppy work was spiritually dangerous, not just physically risky. You're lying in your warm bed now, in your modern house, built by contractors you never met, inspected by officials checking code compliance, probably fine, built to the minimum standard required by law. That house back in Russia, built to standards set by invisible ancestors, built to satisfy spirits that might not exist, but whose judgment mattered more than any inspector's approval. Which house do you trust more? The pitch radiates warmth, the logs hold tight, the moss seals perfect, all of it built by people who believed someone was watching, someone who cared. Whether the domovoi is real doesn't matter. What matters is that believing in him created houses that lasted 200 years. Your modern house will probably last 50 years with constant maintenance. That izba will last 200 with almost none, because every joint was cut like ancestors were watching. The domovoi sits behind the pitch, maybe, probably just mice and shadows and imagination, but also maybe not. You'll never know for sure, but you know this: the people who believed built better houses than the people who didn't, and that's real enough. The house creaks, settles, makes its normal sounds, or maybe that's the domovoi walking his rounds, checking joints, making sure everything's still perfect, making sure the family is still safe. That's his job, has been his job for generations, whether he exists or not. The bread and salt wait behind the pitch. Tomorrow they'll be gone, eaten by something. Tomorrow you'll leave more, because that's what you do. That's what keeps the house strong and the family alive. One small offering at a time. One perfect joint at a time. One uncompromising standard at a time. The domovoi approves, the house stands, the family survives, and somewhere ancestors smile. Maybe. There's a corner in the izba that nobody sits in casually, diagonally opposite from the pitch, as far from the stove as you can get in a room that's only 260 square feet, the Krasny Ugol, the red corner, though red here means beautiful, not the colour. This is where the icons live, the family's religious images placed on a special shelf called the bosnitsa, small paintings of saints, a cross, whatever spiritual items the family keeps. This corner is sacred. You face it when you pray, you bow toward it when you enter the house, if you're being proper about things. Babushka keeps it immaculate, dusts it daily, lights a small oil lamp there sometimes, treats it with more care than she treats most people. Why there? You asked her once. Why that specific corner? Because that's where it goes. Always has, always will. Not a very satisfying answer, but you learn to accept that some things just were because they were. Then one day, maybe 2 years into living in the house, you finally understood why that corner mattered beyond the religious stuff. You were sitting near the pitch, warm and comfortable, and you felt it. A gentle movement of air, cool air flowing in from somewhere. Not a draft, not cold, just fresh air moving. You got up, followed the feeling. The air was coming from the red corner, from a small opening near the ceiling, a vent you'd never really paid attention to before, called a dushnik, just a small gap that could be opened or closed with a wooden cover. The air coming through was cold. Outside air, but it wasn't pouring in like a draft. It was being pulled in, drawn in by something. That something was the pitch. Hot air rises, Everyone knows this. The pitch, being the warmest point in the room, created an updraft, hot air going up toward the ceiling. That hot air had to go somewhere. It would circulate along the ceiling, gradually cooling, eventually sinking back down. But here's the clever part. The red corner, being the furthest point from the pitch, was naturally the coolest spot in the room. Cool air, being denser than hot air, would sink there first. This created a natural circulation pattern. Hot air rises at the pitch, flows across the ceiling, cools, sinks at the red corner, flows back across the floor toward the pitch, rises again, round and round. Add the dushnik to this pattern and you got ventilation, real ventilation. The hot air rising from the pitch created lower pressure at floor level. That lower pressure pulled fresh air in through the dushnik at the red corner. The fresh air would sink, being cold and dense, flow across the floor, get pulled toward the pitch, warm up, rise, carry some of the stale air with it. That stale air would eventually get exhausted through small gaps around the stovepipe or through a separate vent near the pitch. The whole room was breathing, taking in fresh air at the red corner, warming it, circulating it, exhausting stale air near the stove, all without any mechanical help, just physics, just the natural behaviour of hot and cold air. You mentioned this to Ivan, he shrugged. That's just how it works. Every izba is built this way. But why? Who figured this out? Another shrug. The grandfathers. Their grandfathers. Someone way back knew hot air rises and cold air sinks and put the pieces together. Someone way back, someone whose name nobody remembered but whose understanding of airflow kept families from suffocating in sealed houses during 6-month winters. The dushnik would be opened once or twice a day, not for long, maybe 10 minutes, maybe 20, just long enough to completely refresh the air. The incoming cold air would sink immediately, not creating a draft at body level. People sitting or lying down wouldn't feel it much. The air would warm up as it circulated. The whole process was gentle, efficient, lost very little heat compared to how much fresh air it brought in. Babushka controlled when the dushnik opened. She had a sense for it, could tell when the air in the room was getting stale, getting thick, needing replacement. Time, she'd announce. Then she'd open the dushnik and everyone would just go about their business while fresh air flowed in. 10 minutes later, she'd close it. Done. In summer, the dushnik could stay open longer, all day if you wanted. The temperature difference wasn't as extreme, so the circulation was gentler, but it still worked, still pulled fresh air in, still exhausted stale air out. Modern houses need complex ventilation systems to do what the red corner does naturally. Heat recovery ventilators, powered fans, ductwork, controls, all consuming electricity, all needing maintenance, all trying to solve a problem that was solved centuries ago, with one small vent and an understanding of how air moves. The red corner served double duty, spiritual centre and air intake, sacred space and functional ventilation. Nothing in the izba was just one thing. Everything had multiple purposes. Everything worked together. The pech warmed the house, also cooked food, also provided sleeping space, also created the updraft that powered ventilation. The walls kept out cold, also held the structure together, also provided thermal mass, also created the envelope that made the ventilation system work. the roof insulated, also provided additional thermal mass, also held the walls in compression, also grew food for bees in summer, every element connected to every other element. The house was a system, not a collection of parts, a system where removing any piece would break the whole. You're thinking about this now, lying in your bed. Your modern bed in your modern house with your modern HVAC system humming away somewhere, burning energy to move air through ducts. That house back then, the Izba with its red corner and its dushnik and its natural convection, it moved air more efficiently, used zero energy to do it, required zero maintenance beyond opening and closing a wooden cover once a day. The family could gather for evening meals, 10 people in 260 square feet, breathing the same air for months, and it never got stuffy, never got stale. The red corner saw to that. The dushnik pulled in fresh air. The petch created the circulation, physics and faith working together. Because that's what it was. The red corner was positioned there for religious reasons originally, probably, who knows, but it turned out to be the perfect spot for air intake, the coldest spot, the furthest from the heat source, the ideal location for dense fresh air to enter and sink. Did the old builders know the physics? Or did they just know it worked? Did someone calculate convection currents, or did they just notice that houses with the icons in that corner breathed better? Doesn't matter. They figured it out, built it into every house, made it standard, and families survived because of it. You think about all the pieces, all the knowledge, all the techniques, the 4-ton petch storing and releasing heat, the log joints that tightened over time, the moss that breathed and protected, the foundation that floated, the roof that grew, the domovoi that demanded perfection, the red corner that pulled in fresh air. Every piece designed by someone, refined by someone, tested by someone, passed down by someone, all of it working together to keep families alive through conditions that would kill you in minutes if you stepped outside. The builders weren't primitive, weren't backwards, weren't simple people doing simple things. They were engineers, architects, physicists, chemists. They understood thermal mass and convection and moisture management and structural loads and airflow. They just didn't have those words for it, didn't have textbooks, didn't have degrees, just had knowledge, experience, the accumulated wisdom of generations who'd built and failed and learned and built again. Your house right now, the one you're in, it was built by people with engineering degrees, built to code, inspected, certified, and it'll probably last 50 years before needing major repairs, maybe 75 if you're lucky, and maintain it well. That Izba, 200 years, 300, with almost no maintenance because every detail was right, every joint was perfect, every material was ideal, every system was integrated, not because of regulations, not because of inspections, because of knowledge, because of pride, because of the domovoi watching, because of the understanding that mistakes killed people and good work saved them. You're warm right now, fed, comfortable. Your blanket is soft, your pillow is clean, your room is the temperature you want it to be because you have a thermostat and central heating. That family in the Izba, they were warm too, fed, comfortable enough, surviving, thriving even, in conditions that would terrify most modern people. Minus 50 degrees outside, 10 feet of snow, complete isolation for months, 1 fire per day, 1 room, 10 people, and they made it work so well that the techniques lasted centuries, so well that modern engineers study those houses and wonder how they achieved such efficiency with such simple materials. The answer is, they had to. had to get it right, had to make it work. Winter didn't care about excuses, didn't care about good intentions. You either survived or you didn't. Your house either kept you alive or it killed you. So they learned, passed it down, refined it, made it perfect. Because perfect was the minimum acceptable standard when the alternative was death. Your eyes are heavy now. The story is winding down. The family in the Isba is safe. The petch is radiating heat. The walls are tight. The moss is sealing. The foundation is floating. The roof is insulating. The domovoi is watching. The red corner is breathing. Everything is working. Everything is holding. Everything is protecting, just like your house is protecting you now. Different methods, different materials, but same purpose, shelter, warmth, safety. The old ways and the new ways, both trying to solve the same problem: how to keep humans alive in a world that's constantly trying to kill them. The old ways did it with less, with simpler tools, with knowledge instead of technology, with understanding instead of energy. The new ways do it with more, with complexity, with electricity and gas and computers controlling everything. Neither is wrong. Both work. Both keep people alive. But there's something beautiful about a house that works with nature instead of fighting it, that floats instead of anchoring, that breathes instead of sealing, that stores heat instead of constantly creating it. Something beautiful about knowledge passed down through generations. Through mothers teaching daughters which moss matters. Through fathers teaching sons how to read wood. Through grandparents teaching everyone how to survive. That knowledge is fading now. Not many people build isbas anymore. Not many people know which moss to gather, or how to cut a perfect chasha, or how to position a dushnik for optimal convection. But the houses remain, still standing, still protecting families, still working exactly as designed hundreds of years after the builders died. That's legacy, that's immortality, not your name remembered, your work still functioning, still saving lives, still doing its job centuries after you're gone. The builders of that Isba are all dead now, have been for generations. Their names are forgotten, their faces unknown, but their house stands, their techniques worked, their knowledge survived, and families are warm, fed, safe, because of what those builders knew, because of what they did, because they got it right. Your breathing is slowing now, getting deeper, more even. The story is settling into you, the images, the people, the house that survived everything winter could throw at it. Your body sinks into your mattress, your pillow cradles your head, your blanket holds warmth close to your skin. Different from the Isba, different materials, different methods, but same purpose, same outcome: shelter, protection, warmth, safety. The family survived, made it through winter, saw spring come, watched the snow melt and the grass on the roof wake up green again. Flowers bloomed on that roof, bees visited, life continued, the cycle turned. Another winter would come. The house would be ready, would lift with the frost again, would breathe through the red corner again, would keep another family safe for another season, on, year after year, generation after generation, the house doing its job, the knowledge surviving, the techniques working. Your eyes are heavy now, heavier with each breath, your soft bed, your warm room, your full stomach, your safe home, all modern miracles that ancient people could barely imagine. But they had their own miracles. 4-ton stoves that heated for 24 hours from one fire, joints so tight a knife blade couldn't penetrate, moss that fought bacteria and breathed with the seasons, roofs that grew and insulated with 20 tons of snow, foundations that floated on frozen ground, spirits that demanded perfection, corners that breathed fresh air through invisible currents. Different miracles, same result. Survival, comfort, life continuing despite everything trying to stop it. Let your mind drift now. Let the story fade into background. Let the images blur at the edges. Tomorrow you'll wake up warm and safe, just like that family woke up warm and safe, separated by centuries, but connected by the same basic human need for shelter and heat and protection. The peach burns somewhere in memory now. The walls hold in a house you'll never see. The moss seals gaps in logs that turned to dust generations ago. The foundation floats on ground that's frozen and thawed 100 times since. The roof grows green in summers long past. The domovoi watches over families whose names nobody remembers. The red corner breathes in air that moved on decades ago. Everything works, everything holds, everything protects. And you're safe, have always been safe, will wake up safe. Your breathing is deep and slow now, your muscles are loose, your mind is quiet, in houses built by people who knew, who understood, who got it right because they had to. The winter outside can't reach you here, the cold can't touch you, the danger is distant. Your warm bed holds you close. Your house, modern or ancient, does its job, keeping you alive, keeping you warm, keeping you safe. One perfect joint at a time, one handful of moss at a time, one small offering to the spirits at a time. The knowledge holds, the houses stand, the families survive. Let sleep come now, let it arrive gentle and easy. Let it wrap around you like moss between logs, like snow on a sod roof, like warmth from a petch. The story is finished, the family is safe. And so are you. Rest now. Sleep now. Dream of houses that float and roofs